All right, welcome to the DBQ Bootcamp. This is Mr. Kaz here, and at the end of this session, hopefully you're looking like Mr. Grumpy Cat on the right. All right, let's get started. So, we have the APUSH DBQ rubric. 1 point you're going to get for thesis claim, 1 point for contextualization, 3 points for evidence, 2 points for analysis and reasoning, for a grand total of 7 points. All right, so the types of DBQ questions that you're going to see. One could be continuity and change over time, causation, and comparison. All right, start with contextualization. That's your first point. This describes a broader historical context relevant to the prompt. So we have two types of contextualization. We have the pre-context, which think about the Star Wars crawl, all right? Very similar to that. You're going to describe the historical events, developments, or processes that happened in the years and decades before the time period referenced in the prompt. This will be placed at the very beginning of your essay, the first paragraph. Okay, this is going to be helpful in framing the overarching idea or the bigger picture of your entire essay. And then we have post-contextualization, also known as epilogue, right? So think about a good book or a movie. At the very end of the book or movie, sometimes you get that in 5 years after, this is how the people lived, or this is what happened to the people after the final chapter. Okay, and so you're going to include this information. You're going to talk about what happened in the years or decades after the events, developments, or processes from the prompt. Okay, so we kind of give them like an update. Now it's important. Putting this contextualization in two places, it's not required, but it's going to guarantee that you get the point, especially if you do it correctly. Don't take any risks here. Okay, contextualization we're doubling up on. Next, thesis claim. Your thesis will also be shared in two places, in the introduction paragraph and the conclusion. Okay, the 3 parts to the thesis are: 1, it has to respond to the prompt. AP stands for answer the prompt. 2, it has to be historically defensible. That means, can it be argued both ways? And 3, it has to establish a line of reasoning. So you can't just say World War II changed the United States forever. You have to say World War II changed the United States forever because X, Y, and Z. Okay, that's your line of reasoning. Okay, so that's why it's going beyond a simple claim. You have to actually support it with a line of reasoning. You're not going to include evidence yet. That's going to be in the body paragraph, but at least you have to include your line of reasoning. Next up is the evidence, which is the bulk of the grade. That's 3 of the 7 points. So you can go for the 1 point, but you guys are AP, so I think you're going to want to go for the 2 point. So evidence from the document, you have to use at least 6 documents. That's super important. And you have to make sure that each of those documents or the evidence from those documents supports your main argument. Okay, you can't just give random quotes from these documents. In fact, you shouldn't even really use quotes. You should paraphrase the evidence from the documents into your own words and then explain how it supports your argument. Be very clear about that. The next point is the evidence beyond the documents, and that's going to be some evidence that you're going to bring in from your personal background knowledge. It could be something from a homework assignment. It could be something from a reading. It could be something from a class discussion. It should be specific though, right? An event, a person, a speech, all right? You're going to use this historical piece of evidence beyond the documents, and it has to be relevant and it has to support your argument. So just like you're doing with the actual quotes or the actual evidence in the documents, you're doing the same thing but with your own background knowledge. And you only have to do that in one place. Of course, more would be better. I would try to aim for at least one piece of background knowledge per paragraph, if possible, just to double or triple up. All right, analysis and reasoning. The first point you're going to get when you analyze at least 3 documents. And you have to analyze the point of view, purpose, historical situation, or audience of the document. Think about HIPPO, right? Historical context is the H. Intended audience is the I. Purpose is the P. Point of view is the other P. Okay, so you have to do that, but you don't have to do all parts for each of these documents. You just do one. So for example, for one of the documents that you use, you might analyze the point of view. For another document, you might analyze the purpose. For the third document, you might look at the audience. It's important though, your analysis has to support your argument. It can't just be an analysis. This person was a slave owner, so that's his point of view. No, this person was a slave owner, so that's how it affects what he said in the document. Okay, that's the kind of analysis that you're looking for. And finally, our 7th point is the complexity point. Okay, and you can see this bullet point list right here. There are 5 different ways you can earn this point. The easiest one, or the most clear one, I think, is the one that I've highlighted here, explaining both similarity and difference, continuity and change, or causes and effects. Okay, you're not gonna do all of these. It depends on the type of question. If you're doing a continuity and change, you might do mostly your idea is things stayed the same over time. That's your argument, but you're also going to talk about the way things changed. Okay, you can also get this point by analyzing multiple variables. You can get it by talking about insightful connections within and across periods, so talking to a different historical period. That could be helpful. Make sure it also plays in or relates to your argument. You can confirm the validity of an argument by corroborating multiple perspectives across themes. Okay, that's a fancy way of saying, let's take a look at political, economic, social, and see if we can look at this argument from multiple perspectives. Okay, and the final one, qualifying or modifying an argument by considering the alternative point of view. Okay, so that's kind of looking at the counter argument. If you can do that, you're in good shape. You're writing a nuanced essay that has many different kind of perspectives. All right, transition phrases. You guys know about this already. If you don't, you should know. Transition phrases help your writing flow better. They also increase the clarity of your ideas, right? It makes it really clear what you're trying to say when you use transition phrases. So find a list. There's a couple here on the page, but really, I think I've handed one out earlier in the year. Find a page online of transition phrases and learn them. Memorize them. Know when to use them. For example, if you're doing a contrast, you might use the words like forever, conversely, in contrast. If you're adding information to your evidence, you might use furthermore, in addition, moreover. These transition phrases act as transitions between ideas in your essay. Okay, so make sure you're using these. Okay, next, because of some repetitiveness, I think it's better, instead of saying said, there's nothing wrong with saying the author said, but if you do it over and over again, it becomes very redundant. So you don't want to do that. So try to use one of these other colorful words instead of said. The author concluded. The author explained. The author objected. The author complained. The author speculated. The author theorized. The author surmised. So any of these words would be great. If you want to pause and write some of them down, you may do that right now. It's important that you not use any of those words unless you are positive it fits where it is. Don't just put in a random word thinking it fits, because not all of these words are the same. You're going to use them depending on the situation, right? If the author was very forceful, you might say the author declared. But if the author is a little bit more nuanced and a little bit more not so forthright, you might say the author hinted. Okay, there's a big difference between hinted and declared. Okay, moving on. Instead of saying shows or supported or supports, we want to use some more colorful language. So sometimes students will say, this evidence supports the argument because. And that's nothing wrong with that, but if you use that over and over and over again, it gets really boring. Kind of like the said word. So let's see some other options instead of saying shows or supports. The evidence attests to. The evidence certifies. The evidence indicates. The evidence reveals. The evidence exposes. The evidence expresses. These are all examples of words you could be using instead of shows or supports. And finally, a word on academic hedges. It's often believed that academic writing, particularly historical writing, is factual. You guys were raised on that, right? Textbooks are fact. That's not true. History is rarely factual. So an important feature of academic writing is the concept of cautious language, or hedging. This isn't just for history, it's also science, English. Okay? When you write, you should include some of the following hedge phrases below in your argument. So, some modals like may, might, could, should, or would. For example, the word choice used by Lyman Beecher in document 5 could provide insight into his beliefs about slavery. For example, okay, I think this is really helpful to do, right? We're not saying it does provide insight because we're not totally 100% certain. That's okay in academic writing. You have to worry about when people say this is the way it is. That's when people start saying, wait, do you really know that? Okay, some verbs to use: suggest, appear, seem, indicate. The Japanese internment during World War II indicated a lack of permanence of their citizenship. Because if we said the Japanese internment during World War II showed that the Japanese were not citizens, that's actually not correct. Most of them were still citizens. Their rights were being violated, but they were still citizens. So it indicates a lack of permanence. Do you see that the difference there? It's small, but it sounds more academic when you say it like that. And finally, using qualifiers like presumably, possibly, perhaps, conceivably. An example is, the political cartoon portraying Andrew Jackson as a king is perhaps a reaction to his threat to send troops to South Carolina. We're not saying that it's definite. We're not saying the political cartoon definitely shows, or that it's definitely a reaction to his threat to send troops to South Carolina, because we're not completely clear. It wouldn't say that in a political cartoon. Okay, so we use the word perhaps as a hedge because we think that's what happened, but we're not completely sure. I know it sounds weird looking unsure as a way to make a better argument, but that's actually the whole idea behind hedges, right? Because once again, history is rarely factual. All right, that's all I got for you guys. Hopefully this helped clarify some things, and hopefully it helps you write a better DBQ. Good luck.